Hello, and welcome to the Blizzard Watch podcast. I'm Matt. I'm your host. With me this week are my fantabulous co-hosts, Liz and Joe, and we're going to jump right into talking about stuff because stuff happened last week after we did last week's podcast, and it's the holidays, so there's not a lot of stuff from this week to talk about as yet. So first up, I think we're going to talk about the world first thing first because Liz was casting for world first race this week, and therefore she'll have a lot of insights, or at least such is my hope, so I can sit here and be cold. Liz, what's going on? Talk about that echo kill.
Yes, world first Mythic Razagath has come and gone. Echo got the kill. Liquid was not that far behind. And just today, that's Tuesday, December 27th, Method came in and got world third, and BDGG is pretty close. I think they'll probably kill it tonight. They've got Razagath down to 2%. And Razagath is really interesting because it's a 3-phase fight with 2 intermissions, and the thing that sticks in my mind about this fight is that when my guild leader was kind of going through and linking guides and, giving little brief rundowns of each fight so we could go in and not mess it up, he said, it's a 3-phase fight with 2 intermissions. Just watch the bleep video because it's a long and complicated fight. And it's going about 350 pulls for most guilds. Method did it in like 265. Echo. One day I'm going to get all of these straight because I still want to say limit when I'm supposed to say liquid. And there were too many names. There are too many guild names. So Echo got it in about 265, I believe. But like watching guilds do this, you would see guilds just get stuck at like 60%, and they would do like 100 pulls and they would only get to 60% because the first intermission starts at 60%. So they'd get there and they couldn't push past it. And they would do like 100 pulls at 60%. And then the next phase kind of starts at 35, somewhere in there. And you'd see the fight had really hard progress breakpoints whenever they got to a new intermission or a new phase. They'd sit there for like 100 pulls, every guild, and then they'd make really, really fast progress to get to the next phase, and then they'd get stuck again. So it's been a fight with a lot of ups and downs, but we have the top 3 in the world. One of the, of course, controversial things about this is that Liquid and Echo were like neck and neck. And then Blizzard nerfed the fight. And it was kind of during prime time for Echo. And so they went and they nailed the kill. And that's always one of the really weird things about World First, is this is super not a fair fight. And down there at the end, I thought, okay, this is just going to come down to who is online and playing when the next nerf comes in. Because both Echo and Liquid were really close. And it's like, it seemed pretty obvious that another nerf was coming in because this fight was really hard. This was really pushing these top tier guilds. And yeah, then the nerf came in and it was while Echo was playing and Liquid was not. So that's what happened. Of course, I don't want to downplay the amount of skill these guilds have. Echo is really good. And they did close the kill like 100 pulls less than Liquid did. That's a lot of skill. That's a lot of determination and effort. But it's still like, why these fights are so weird in that they're so unbalanced. It's so strange because this is just it's not a level playing field for anyone.
Well, I think it's part of the problem is that they don't put them up for much testing. I mean, I don't think Mythic got any testing, did it?
No, it was a black box. It did not get tested.
Testing. It was internal testing, and that's basically it. That's the kind of thing that's going to end up leading to people, whoever, as you said, is on when the nerf comes down.
And they did do a couple of nerfs to that fight while people were progressing on it, and just the last one came when Echo was playing.
I also wonder how much of that was because they were doing this during the holiday season.
I did kind of feel that like Blizzard wanted this fight to be done before Christmas, and so they came in with like a last minute nerf.
I mean, I don't know if that's true, but
I don't know if it is either.
It's something I was thinking about, is what I should say. Just because of the timing was what it was.
Yeah, I mean, both Liquid and Echo killed Razagath before Christmas Eve. So they had like Christmas the Eve and Christmas, and BDG and Method did not kill it by then. You know, Method just did it today. I think BDG is on the verge, and you know, you're playing through the holidays.
Yeah. All right. One last thing to mention about this fight before we move on to other topics. Razagath's got a cute hat, so talk about that.
I mean, I think that's really important. Kind of when some nerfs went through. Just I think it was on Thursday. Suddenly Razagath was wearing a Christmas hat and had a wreath in one hand and a candy cane in the other. So that last bit of progression on Mythic Razagath, everyone was fighting this giant dinosaur dragon with dressed up in her holiday finery.
That seems fine. Also, I mean, like if you go into the Vault of Incarnates now, the very first room, like before you start even the first encounter stuff, Dadgar has a Santa hat, and there is a Christmas tree. There's a Christmas tree with presents in the very first room.
That's amazing.
So,
alrighty. Last week, I think we did this podcast on Tuesday as we usually do, and then of course on Wednesday, Blizzard decided, hey, let's put out a whole lot of information about next year. And
y'all know how this goes.
Yeah. So to sum it up before I throw it over to these guys to chat, basically we found out we're going to get 6 patches with 2 seasons, season 2 and season 3 of Dragonflight, and then 2 patches before season 2 and 2 patches before season 3. So 6 patches in total. And of those patches
in 2023.
In 2023, sorry. And of those patches, at least 2 per season are going to be content oriented. There will be maybe not necessarily patch 10.0.5, for instance, isn't going to have any new content per se, but 10.0.7 is going to have new content, including a new quest hub. We don't really know much at all about the patches after that because, come on, we're like looking at months and months out at this point. So, do either of you guys anything in particular you want to talk about before we just give a general discussion of this stuff?
There's so much. I think we should just go in and talk.
I think it's interesting that they laid out a 2023 roadmap and did not say that this is all we're getting.
That's true. That is true. They didn't. Usually expansions last 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And technically this expansion only came out in late November. So it is not, I would not expect the next expansion until late November of 2024. So that's how I'm looking at it, but who knows? Liz?
So yeah, it seems perfectly likely that we'll get a 9.3 as well sometime in 2024, and perhaps patches leading up to that because they're kind of doing 2 small patches, then a big patch, then 2 small patches, then a big patch. So yeah, we could have another patch cycle or 2 after this roadmap.
Honestly, I feel like calling 10.0.5 a small patch. I mean, it doesn't have any like new content to play through. But, I mean, they completely redid 2 talent trees from the ground up. They changed talents for pretty much every class.
Yeah, they've also been doing that in hotfixes since it launched. So, I mean, yeah. I just don't think it's that huge of a patch. It does have a lot of class changes, but it's not... Like, it kind of feels like this is the stuff they didn't get finished finalizing before the expansion launched. And now they're getting it in there.
Yeah, I'm interested. Did they tell us what Primalist Tomorrow is?
Nope.
Because that feels like content. That feels like story.
We have no idea what that is. It's an event of some kind.
I'm curious because we now have access to the Bronze Dragonflight area. So,
I guess we should go up and say it. Patch 10.0.5 is due out in winter 2023, and it is said to contain the trading post, something called Primalist Tomorrow, and white and gray transmog, as well as the class changes Matt was talking about.
Yeah. Quite frankly, I have no idea what Primalist Tomorrow is, but I'm interested to find out, obviously. But you were talking on the pre-show about how it feels like there's so much to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like they're not slowing down on that. This reminds me of, do you remember back when Mists of Pandaria was coming out? Wow, we're all so old. And they basically we were going away for the holidays, and they dropped the news that the next patch with the Thunder, the Throne of Thunder raid was going to be on the PTR in January. And we were like, what? And then that boom, like within a month and a half, it was out. And that was like the content pace was really fast for Mists of Pandaria right up until Siege came out. And then obviously when Siege came out, content delivery stopped for a year. That's something that I've been thinking about a lot with this. Like, I really hope they don't do that.
Well, that's what I think is interesting about getting this roadmap. It's Blizzard has in the past been really, really bad about front-loading content and then doing nothing for a year. And that is not fun for us. That's not fun for anyone who plays the game. But in this roadmap, they've outlined content coming out every few months throughout the year without any we're going to roll out a patch in the summer and then we're going to forget the game exists for a year. Okay, they don't. I'm being sarcastic. They don't really do that. I know everyone works really hard to give us content, but sometimes it feels like there's just nothing because the cadence of rolling out patches can be very weird. So I like seeing this big roadmap that lines out regular content releases.
Yeah, this is more akin to what I've been kind of, I don't want to say screaming for, but like I really wanted exactly something like this for a long time where, and this may be an unpopular opinion, I'm kind of over like whole big expansions as far as like system changes and things like that go. And I'm almost at a point in my life where I'm starting to prefer games that just do consistent, constant updates. I know WoW is never going to be that. I don't think it'll ever make that shift. It's always going to have sort of the expansion release thing, but this feels closer to that, like closer to having the regular updates to keep the thing fresher longer. Matt pointed out that we generally run 2 years between expansions. You know, if there was constant patching and constant updates between major expansions, I feel like that 2 years wouldn't matter as much. We wouldn't be as keenly focused on that time frame as we usually are. Like, so I'm curious if this is like the start of seeing if something like that would work for them, or at least adopting some of that mentality that other games do, right?
Let's look at patch 10.0.7 then, if we're going to be talking about that, because that's the first story stuff we're going to get. The first major story patches. They've told us about 3 things. One of them is that it's going to go up to the Forbidden Reach, where the Drakthir starting zone is. We're going to go there as, max level characters, and there's going to be questing and so forth. It'll be somewhat similar to such zones we've seen before, like Tanan Jungle in Warlords, or the Argus stuff in Legion, or Nazjatar in Battle for Azeroth, or the 2 of them that we got in Shadowlands. So it's not like a new idea, but it's interesting there because it's the first confirmed story and questing stuff we're going to get after Vault of the Incarnates. And the second thing there is that they told us that it will be leading into where we end up going after that. Like, we're going to find out where the next destination is, and that's interesting for a variety of reasons. Thirdly, we get human and orc heritage armor is also coming in 10.0.7. And as of right now, we have no idea what that questing is going to look like. But we know that it's going to be there. We've seen the previous ones. I mean, I don't think anybody on this call has like a human main.
Not anymore. Not
or an
these
orc
days.
of any real, I have a human. I do play it. I did level it to 70, but it's a human male, and I just hate it so much facially. Like, I never liked human faces, but my God, they look like just like Homo erectus now. They're just not right. So yeah, I'm not looking forward to that, but it's still pretty cool for people who do like that idea. And I do like that they're getting more heritage armor in. It feels a bit like a callback to the first Warcraft game as well.
Yeah.
Or
Orcs and humans. That's the classic.
Yeah. So anything about that in particular? I mean, I could go on and on about 10.0.7 in terms of what I think the storytelling stuff for it's going to be, but this isn't Lore Watch, and we do have other things to talk about. So instead, I'll just say that I'm interested to see how they change up the tried and true, go to a new place, get a new quest hub, do stuff around it. If you guys remember, and I'm sure you do, Battle for Azeroth had Nazjatar, but then it also had Mechagon.
Yep. And
Mechagon was a much more free-form experience. It was just go here, run around looking for stuff, and kill it. Whereas Nazjatar was a much more organized, funneling you towards the raid sort of zone. You've looking back at all the other kinds of zones like this we've seen. What are you hoping for out of this? What do you want this to be like?
I don't know. I'm trying to go in without any expectations, right? Like it's one of those things where I'm kind of just curious to see what they want to do with it and kind of just experience it for what it is. Cause like, I'm one of the people, like, I did not like Korthia. Like, I don't know why. It didn't like click with me at all. So I'm curious to see if they can do something that isn't Korthia, but still gives that sort of like experience of expanding the game world or whatever they're going for. I'm just curious to see what they're going for. So 0 expectations for me.
Liz?
I mean, I'm interested in seeing the story continue. That's usually my thing with Warcraft. I'm interested in kind of where the story's going. And, any story game, I want to know the story. I don't necessarily care that much about, I mean, I do care about the mechanics, but I want to know where they're going with this. Dragonflight has like a story that engages me a lot, which has not been true. Battle for Azeroth, I was kind of like, could we do this without story? But even then, even when I was not into the story quests were really good and they were packed with amazing cinematics. So that was still something I looked forward to. So I want to know what happens next. That's me.
I was just lifting this up to my mouth when you stopped talking.
Sorry.
I would say for me personally, one of the things I'm interested to see is they've added in the story unlocks at certain renown levels that they put in Shadowlands, which I thought was a pretty interesting dynamic. That's still the case in Dragonflight, and I'm almost to the point where I can unlock one of the stories I've been looking forward to for a while. I'm interested to see if they continue that going forward, if they have the story unlocked like that, or if they bring something back like the Operation Shield Wall / Dominance offensive stuff from Mists, where the quests unlocked over a week-by-week basis. There's a lot of different ways we could see it happen. I'm also interested in stuff that has nothing to do with this, but which I think is going to tie into it. I saw Joe on Twitter talking about the Nosdormu time-traveling quests and about not seeing Neptulon.
Yep.
In those quests. But did you notice the other interesting thing?
The one that Therazane was the only one that was targetable to be attacked, but the other 2 were yellow mobs?
They're not yellow mobs. They're red.
They're yellow.
I was just there today. They're red.
Then they changed it because when I took the screenshots, they were yellow.
They're yellow if you don't actually point at them, but they're red when you look at the text. But regardless, what I thought was interesting about that was that they're hostile to you. All the various elementals are hostile to you, but they're also attacking the old god minions.
Oh, yeah.
So this is before the old gods conquered the elementals. And I think that's going to be important in the story going forward.
I agree. You and I were talking about that on Lore Watch. That's where we made that theory about right at the end there, which if you haven't listened to Lore Watch, go do it. I'm going to self-plug here because I'm really proud of that.
But so I'm interested to see how it ties into what we do on the I want to say Broken Shore, but it's the Forbidden Reach. I'm interested to see how it works, how it plays out. I'm also interested in seeing if we see more of the zone than we got to as Drakthir.
Yeah, because we were kind of funneled along through it, right?
I feel like we have to see more of the zone. I mean, we have to, that's kind of going to be the thing. We're going to have to untangle the secrets that Neltharion left behind. And that means exploring those vaults and looking around and maybe finding more about how he sealed Razagath away.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And the fact that I'm, choking to death on my own throat doesn't change that fact. But yeah, I think that's something I want to see more of, to explore that Forbidden Reach. But I'm also real curious about this where we're going next line that they just sort of dropped in there and then walked away from it, like they didn't just lob a hand grenade at us. What do you mean? Where are we going? There's 2 islands off the coast of the Onaran Plains that you don't really get to go to. They're just past where the Green Dragonflight has their magic tree, and I'm real curious about those. I definitely want to see more about that. But then it's what do you mean where we're going next? You've done this to me before, Blizzard. I still remember for Warlords of Draenor where you had all that stuff just off the edge of the map and you never went to any of it. I see you, Blizzard. I remember that. Remember where we are ooh, what are we going to do in Farallon? And it turned out nothing. Nothing in Farallon. You're not going there. You'll have a mission table mission to Farallon. Hope that's good enough. Thankfully, we don't have a mission table this time, so I don't have to worry about that happening. Although it'd be hilarious if we went to Farallon in this expansion. I was like, what are we doing here? Oh, you wanted Farallon, here it is. But yeah, there's a lot coming. We really don't know the extent of it. We know there's going to be at least 2 more raid tiers. We don't know that it'll be 2 raids. It could be like, in the past we've gotten a raid tier that was like a smaller raid and a larger raid. In Battle for Azeroth, that was Dazar Lore and Council. Like I want to say Council of Storms. I don't remember what the name of the actual raid was, but we all know the one I'm talking about. The 2 boss raid with old gaudy stuff going on.
Yep.
So that's entirely possible. We then got 2 more raids after that. It's actually kind of interesting to realize that Battle for Azeroth had 4 raid tiers.
I mean, I don't really count the mini raids as a raid tier.
Well, I think you kind of have to for Dazar Lore, because Dazar Lore was like a 6 boss raid.
I mean, yeah, Dazar Lore was a raid, but the little mini old god raid was, that was
Uldir or the Council of
Storm? No,
the Storm one, the one with 2 bosses.
That's not what it's called. I can't remember what it's called either, because I went in there, I killed everything, I left, and very gladly never went back.
Yeah, but I mean that counts as part of the raid tier of Dazar Lore because they came out at the same time. That's all I mean. I still, if you have to go with Uldir, then Dazar Lore, then Ashar's Eternal Palace, and then finally Nyalotha. That's 4 raids, and they have all different tiers. So still 4 raid tiers. Shadowlands, I think Shadowlands has 3, right?
Yeah. I mean, 3 is kind of the
3
typical.
is the standard. So it's interesting to realize that Battle for Azeroth went to 4. I don't know what we're going to see for Dragonflight. Dragonflight feels like so unprecedented that I really have no idea what a lot of stuff is going to be. We're looking at 3 raid tiers right now just from the different seasons. Are we going to get a season 4 that's like the Shadowlands season 4 where it's basically just fated raids? Or are we going to get a full complete story season and then maybe a season 5 that does the same kind of thing? If we get a thing, one like that at all, although they have said that they liked how it worked for Shadowlands and they do want to bring it back. And I personally think that having the raid scale at the end is a lot of fun. I
agree.
But anything else you want to talk about white and gray items?
I mean, I think we already talked about that last week, didn't we?
I don't think so.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, okay. we just knew that white and gray items. We already knew that was coming in 10.05.
Yeah.
And so that's more transmog. I'm all for it.
It's weird to me just because I never have ever really thought about white or gray items that much. It's just not something I'm usually much more of a, I must kill this same boss over and over and over again until he gives me my stuff. But it is interesting that they're finally making like one more change to transmog, bringing us one step closer to my eventual dream of just letting everybody transmog everything all the time. And then, of course, make it free. Because my God, the amount of gold I'm spending on this.
Yeah, so much.
But I think we're going to move on to, we've covered the Heritage Armor. I think we should at least mention that the Vault of the Incarnates Wing 2, the next wing, is opening next week on January 2nd.
For LFR.
For LFR. And for LFR Wing 3 is opening on January 16th. Then in case you're currently trying to get yourself up to the point where you can get in. I think it's item level 359 for LFR in order to queue for LFR.
Somewhere in there, I think.
I think that's correct, yeah, because it's whatever the heroic is, which I think is heroic gears at 359.
Yeah, in order to queue for heroics, you need 342 eye level. The gear that drops in them is 359. Yeah. So if you're not having luck getting stuff in dungeons, you can always do the incredibly long and grindy elemental storms and get yourself some gear that way. My God, it takes forever. But yeah, I was gonna do a whole thing about asking if we think LFR should just open at the same time, just open the whole thing and maybe open a week after, like when Mythic goes live. But Mythic went live during everything else this time. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like at this point that making people wait till mid-January for LFR Wing 3 is kind of weird. I don't really see the point.
I mean, the only thing I can say is that at least they're only doing it in 3 wings this time, so it doesn't take quite as long, because typically they start releasing it like a week or 2 after Mythic, and then 2 weeks between each wing. And if you have 4 wings, that is forever to get all of LFR out.
That's like 2 months down the road.
I'm actually really curious. Have they ever said why they do that?
I don't think so.
I know back in the olden days, it was probably because they were making adjustments on the fly pretty regularly to encounters to balance them for LFR. But I don't remember the last several LFR raid tiers that came out that they had to do much adjustment to like broad swaths of encounters or anything like that. So I'm curious if we're at a point, or if they're at a point where these encounters can just all be released in one fell swoop. Like I'm really curious. I'd be interested to hear the reasoning why they're not.
Yeah, I mean, there could certainly be a reason, but regardless, I just feel like it just takes a very long time for LFR to come out. I mean, I don't even run LFR that much. I usually just do normal mode and if heroic mode if we get that far. So for me, it's not a major deal, but it is weird to me. But you know, everybody feels differently, so we'll see. So maybe someone's going to come in and explain why they do it that way. I honestly don't know.
It kind of feels like at this point it's something they do because that's the way they've always done it. And like, does it need to be that way? I don't know, but this is the way we've always done it.
Well, they changed the way they did Mythic, so they put that out at the exact same time. Maybe they could just put it. I mean, that might have just been a Christmas thing for all I know. They looked at it and said, "Yeah, we got to open this earlier because Christmas is coming up." I don't know. In addition to that, the Wing 2 opening on January 2nd, that's when Winter Veil is going to end in WoW. And I think most of the other Blizzard holiday stuff is all ending around that same time, right? Except the Diablo 3 one. Yeah,
the Diablo 3 one goes into February, but most holiday events, Diablo 2, Overwatch, and Hearthstone, yes, that's the other game in my head, are ending that first week of January. So if you want to do those, get in and do them.
All right. Okay, going to move on then. I think at this point we can move on to some questions. If you've got a question for the podcast, you can email it to us. Please do. Guys, please. Seriously, there was nothing in the email folder today. It was so lonely. I didn't even have Overwatch stuff to steal. I understand it's the holidays, but come on, guys. Send it to the podcast. What?
We're not talking about the otter mount?
Oh, did I skip that? I'm the one that wrote this email. Okay, talk about the otter mount.
Don't get me wrong. Like I want to talk about the questions and stuff like that, but it's an otter and he wears sunglasses or like goggles, and you can go and fish him up, and he's amazing. I don't want him.
Okay, is that all you want to say about him, or do you have more to say about it?
It's you don't quite fish him up. It's just a quest that involves a lot of fishing because you have to fish up like 75 copper coins, and those are not common drops.
Yeah, and then you have to trade. You have to trade them into the Great Swag in order to exchange them through and get everything you need for it.
If you don't know, the Great Swag is a giant frog that you can find in a cave.
You can pay coin to. I like stuff like this, and I'm kind of really hoping that there's more stuff like this added to the game. So like I had found what the heck is it called? I can't remember, but it's basically a sky fox. It's a fox wyvern that you get by exchanging. You go through like the bracken hide quest. You go through the normal quest, and you do one of the alternate hubs in Azure Span, and then there's an NPC who is normally a stable master. So unless you're a hunter, generally speaking, you're not going to go talk to them. But I have this nasty tendency of if I can click on somebody and they look like they have a different colored aura, I'm going to click on them and I'm going to see what they have. And at this point, there was like a sky slivern or something like that, I think is what it's called. He was like, you can give me X number of things and I will give you this mount. Like I will give you this thing to carry with you. And it's like, it was just like this little random thing. And it costs like 20 of each of these like random things that you can get from questing or from there's a Knoll bar that you can go break up and like steal their food, and that's one of the things he wants because the sliver was raised on it. It's an interesting little touch, and you get a really cool mount. And while you can't use it yet in Dragonflight, you can use it in the old world. I'm super happy about that. But like this, it's a long quest line of stuff to go and get this mount. But it's unique and it's obtainable, and it's also not gated behind like this huge, massive mystery of like cryptic things hidden in the world that you have to be on like the secrets of Discord and hope that somebody figures it out. or like be refreshing Wowhead or our site to get like the exact steps on how to unlock the mount. This one, yeah, it has a lot of steps, but it's not gated. It's all obtainable. It just takes time. And I like stuff like that. I don't mind spending time on something like a cool like a little like otter mount, a dragon otter mount. So I'm kind of hoping there's more stuff like that throughout the game. It also gives me a really good case of you should talk to all the vendors and you should see what the vendors have. Because I got and everybody, I'm sure a lot of people have gotten it at this point, the lava snail mount. That's another mount that you can get in the game. You'll randomly get an epic level empty shell as you're leveling through and killing stuff in like the Waking Shores. And it doesn't tell you what it's for, right? There's no subtext or anything that gives you a hint about it or anything like that. But it turns out that you're just going to go find a lava slug, which they're all over the place. By the way, food for beef. But you go find a giant lava slug inside of a lava pool. And if you have the shell on you, that's what gives you the mount. He gets in, you get into you basically say, get in your home, and it goes in the home. But a lot of people sold that shell because they didn't know what it was for. It was just like an epic level thing. And I think it sold for 500 gold or something like that. So it's the incentive is there to sell it. But I really like little tiny things like that seem so insignificant, like fishing up copper coins, but turn into something cool like a mount. So, sorry, I really like mounts, and I really like unique model mounts.
Okay, I am, however, going to explain how to do this for people who might actually want to do it, because we haven't done that. First up, you need to get the aquatic shades. It's a toy. When you get them, then you can basically use them to find the swag, the immaculate sack of swag treasures. You need to have the goggles for this. Then the great swag, who is the cave frog, for lack of a better word, you basically have to do the fishing thing that Liz and Joe were talking about. However, you can also get the coins a different way. You can also go fight the lunker mobs in the fishing holes.
Mm-hmm.
And the lunkers, that's the fastest way to get the coins. So keep that in mind. If you don't necessarily have to fish, you can grind up these coins by fighting lunkers. I don't know if you need an actual raid, like it says lunker raids here, and I don't know if they mean literally put a raid together or if they just mean a bunch of people attacking them. That's not something I know. But once you have the 75 copper coins, you can trade them for 15 silver coins, for 5 silver coins, sorry. And then you need 5 silver coins for every gold coin. And the sack costs a gold coin, so 5 times 15, 75. That's how many copper coins you'll need if you don't get any silver coins to get the gold coin of the Isles to trade for the sack of treasures and get the mount. And he's a pretty cool mount. As Joe points out, he's a big otter mount with shades on. Yeah, that's basically it on that as far as I can tell. Anything else, Liz?
No, I am very pro mounts with sunglasses. It's a good look.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so now that we've done that, Joe, is it okay if I...
I'm sorry, I just wanted to talk about the mount because he's so cute.
That's
Okay,
fine.
yes, please continue.
Okay, so again, if you have any question for the show, email it to podcast@blizzardwatch.com. I will let Joe talk about the otter every week if we don't start getting some emails. I'm not kidding. I will turn this show around and turn it into Otter Watch. Watch me. But if you don't happen to like sending emails, and I know people who don't, we do have 2 channels for people to ask us questions. One is the Patron Q and Podcast Questions channel for patrons, because we like to take patron questions first when it's possible, because patrons do that whole thing where they pay the bills for the site. And if you don't want to, if you're not happen to be a patron of the site, which is understandable, there's a lot going on in the world. We got done talking about the weather catastrophe a few minutes ago. So yeah, maybe you've got a weather catastrophe issue. I don't know. But regardless, you can still ask us questions in the Q and Podcast Questions channel for non-patrons. And we will look there as well for answers and questions and so forth. This week, I'm just going to read the first one. And then it'll be Joe, and then it'll be Liz, and then I'm going to be done. I'm not going to read any more because my throat sounds like him. But the first one. Hey, everybody. So Dragonflight's pretty fun, and I find myself wondering, what do you think it's actually doing differently than the last couple of expansions? What makes it fun? Is it dragon riding? Is it the complicated new crafting scenario? The lack of faction conflict? If you had to pick something to hold up as a reason that this is a good expansion, what would it be? Corn, Sorry, Joe, I don't have a Warhammer question, but I'm super excited for Rogue Trader.
As am I.
So, what makes it fun?
Everything.
Liz, go.
I mean, I think it's because there is so much depth going on. It's not just, okay, there's a main story quest and there are a few side quests. It's like every zone you go to is just full of life and stuff happening. Even if you aren't directly involved, you can talk to NPCs who will talk about what's going on. Even if they don't even have a quest, they're just hanging out there and you can talk to them. There are tons of little side stories that are, not involved in the big stuff happening in the world, but, little things just people are doing. The place feels just full of life and interest, I suppose. And even as you grind reputation, as you earn renown with factions, you unlock more story quests, which I think is an interesting new way to do stuff, because usually you didn't have stories locked behind reputation like this. I think it's really interesting that you can continue to work on your renown, and as you get up, you unlock new little stories. And even now, we're a month out from the expansion launch, and there are still side quests that I haven't done. There are still, sometimes I'll be flying around looking for ore to mine, and I'll be like, wait, there's an exclamation point down there. It's a side quest I've never seen. And I've been playing this game a lot for the past month, and I'm still finding new stuff. I've just unlocked a couple of new story quests through Renown. It feels like every time I log on, I have something to do, and I'm part of a world that is really interesting, and just, it feels like it's overflowing with people and characters and events. And I mean, in a good way. It's just, this is a vibrant, living world in a way I don't know that Warcraft's ever been.
I want to put a lot of this on dragon riding, I think, too. So one of the things we've always complained about with expansions in general is the idea of flying being gated or being held back. And it feels bad. And they said that they want you to experience the world. And I understand that. But we've always made the case that you can experience the world just fine by flying. And instead of just giving us flat out flying, they gave us a more engaging flying right out the gate, right? Dragon riding is, in my opinion, one of the best things that they've done to flying in a long time. It's not the sit and hover and wait and do stuff like that. It encourages you, because it is all momentum, and basically encourages you to continually move forward, because you can't just hover in place, to explore, to maybe see what else is out there, maybe a couple of yards beyond where you intended to go. And like Liz is pointing out, sometimes you'll just find a random exclamation point or an area that you haven't explored yet, or, maybe there's a random NPC or a rare mob that spawns that you just happen to find because you were just flying around. And it's a thing. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to take anything away from regular flying, and I really like regular flying, and I'm looking forward to it coming back so I can take some better screenshots. But I think it works in the expansion's favor. It also helps make the world feel like the Dragon Isles feel larger as a result of that, if that makes sense. But it's just very engaging. So I think that helps. Everything that they've done so far has really been about player engagement, and I think making you do stuff whether you like it or not. I see Molly in chat commenting about it being a whole entire job. It can be, but you can't help but say the crafting and other things like that feel like they at least have some value now, because they are more engagement based than just the thing that exists.
My microphone down to my face. I'm having a wonderful day of not remembering what I'm doing. I don't have an answer because they took my answers. I mean, Joe, I was either I'll fall back on crafting, and Joe went to crafting. I'm like, well, then that's it then. But I will say that I'm enjoying my class. I've played nothing but warriors so far. I haven't played anything else. And I've played 4 warriors to 70. And while I did complain about the last one, it was, I did a lot of different things. I did different specs. I tried some stuff out. One of my warriors is single-minded fury. Another went prot the whole way. So yeah, there's a lot of variety with the new talent system that is a lot better than I expected it to be. I'm not saying it doesn't have flaws. I'm not saying there's not stuff I don't like.
Well, I got a laundry list of complaints.
I'm already tired of the cookie cutter build stuff, but in general, I got to play I played 4 warriors to max, and I didn't ever feel like I was on the same guy. Like they weren't the same. I took different talents and came up with different builds for different things. Were they all optimal? Would I raid on them? No, absolutely not. But the other cool thing is that since you can switch your talents whenever you want for nothing, if you've got a build that's good for one thing but not another thing, you can switch it. And it's not onerous. It's not a burden. Like if you tank for raids but you want a DPS in your off time, it's a button push. So yeah, I honestly think the talent system, for all its flaws and for all that it needs a lot more work done on it, it's going in the right direction for me at this time. And I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. But that means now it's up to one of you two to read the next one. Let's say Liz.
Okay. Scrolling. Where's the next question? Ice Wizards asks, what's your favorite dinosaur? I feel like we had this question before.
Yeah, he asked it a lot.
I mean,
I'm always going to put it in if we're having a down day. I'm going to put this question in.
I mean, my favorite dinosaur is the Triceratops. They're great. They have horns. They're just awesome. Triceratops all the way.
Matt, go ahead. I know you want to.
No, I'm last.
I'm not going to answer.
Okay, then let's talk about Joe, shall we? Joe, recalcitrant Joe. You won't talk about dinosaurs. Joe, if I answer this question right now, it's going to take 10 minutes. Seriously.
I'm aware. Talk.
I like so many dinosaurs that I can't possibly name a favorite one. So instead of naming a favorite one, I'm going to talk about Zhucheng tyrannus today. Zhucheng tyrannus is a Chinese dinosaur. Its full name is Zhucheng tyrannus maximus. Magnus. My bad. Zhucheng is slightly smaller than Tarbosaurus, who is itself slightly smaller than T-Rex, which puts Zhucheng up there in terms of tyrannosaurid size. The reason I like it is, we discovered it through relatively few bone fragments, and B, it's got a lot of distinctiveness from other tyrannosaurids of its size, despite the fact that we only have a few bone fragments. We've got most of the mouth and part of the skull, and a few pieces of bone from the rest of the body. And yet we already know that it's got a different orbital alignment. Its eyes were in different places. One of the things about tyrannosaurids in particular is when you get up to T-Rex almost had binocular vision, which is very rare. Most theropods had something a lot more like what a horse would have, like an eye on each side. They would have almost a dead spot in front of them. They turn their heads to see in front of them. Not as bad as a horse, but they definitely had more side vision. But T-Rex, as the skulls grew, their eyes swung forward a bit, and they had more front vision. Zhucheng is interesting in that it has more forward-facing vision than Tarbosaurus, less than T-Rex, but more than Tarbosaurus, and a skull that is more heavily built around the sides, which would make it good for the things that we expect a Tyrannosaur to be good at, like, biting, crushing with its teeth. It's close enough. Both Zhucheng and Tarbosaurus are close enough to Tyrannosaurus that it's like some paleontologists still argue that they're the same species, that they're all just Tyrannosaurus, that there's no real difference between them. Others point out there are a lot of physiological differences. I'm not a paleontologist. You'd need an actual scientist, but that's why I'm bringing up Zhucheng, because I like the fact that they've discovered Zhucheng fairly recently, that he is this big Tyrannosaurid that we didn't know about at all. He illustrates the changes that we are not aware of. Like all these different species we only know from a few fossils. Like we have a lot of T-Rex fossils, but a lot of T-Rex fossils is a couple dozen. And there's like millions of years of evolution that we don't have anything from. So that's it. This week it's Zhucheng. Next week's probably going to be Acrocanthosaurus again, but I'm not talking about Acro. Joe?
All right, I'll move on to the next question. Ask you I have come to do. Trouble that I am having is taking incarnates seriously with arms like tiny babies they be having. Small and often just sort of wiggling, it is impossible to not be giggling. Why are they so? Is arm day what they were skipping when they were in time they were tripping? And this is from Kodal Amu? Yeah, I got nothing. It's part of the Proto-Drake design, right? Because that's what they're based off of. And if you look at Proto-Drakes in general, they always have like their winged T-Rexes, essentially, right? Sorry, go ahead, Liz.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. They have little T-Rex arms. They have, just tiny arms, and kind of the big part of their torso is their wings. And I mean, a T-Rex it's a pretty intimidating beastie, despite the fact that it has tiny arms. I think, yeah, the tiny arms are a little hilarious. And particularly Razagath, who has her Santa hat on right now and has a candy cane in one tiny arm and a wreath in the other tiny arm. It's pretty ridiculous. But they can still be scary, just like a T-Rex can still be scary. I am curious as to what Matt thinks about this odd resemblance between protodrakes and certain types of dinosaurs.
See, the problem is that I know enough about dinosaurs to know that their arms are much bigger than a T-Rex's. So I'm like, oh, they don't look like T-Rexes at all. And I'm trying really hard to restrain the urge to go on a 20-minute. You see, on a T-Rex, the arms are not atrophied. They're fully functional, but they're directly down to the point where they couldn't even reach out past the mouth, blah, 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 blah. Point being, I think that they just did that to try and show off. They wanted them to look primitive. Because keep in mind, when they first introduced protodrakes, they were in Northrend, and that was this is where dragons come from, and we're not going to explain any more about that. And I think that's basically was just a visual choice because dragons have big sinuous arms. They have four limbs that go down below their bodies. And their forelimbs are perfectly, they're proportional to the rest of their bodies. They look kind of like big lizardy cats. So having the protodrake have the little baby arms coming out, it's inherently primitive looking. It looks like a primitive condition, what we would call basal in actual paleontology. It looks ancestral. Don't think that's actually the case. And I'll point out that in Tyrannosaurids, it went exactly the opposite direction. The more advanced, the more derived Tyrannosaurids, their limbs continued to shrink because they didn't need them. Like, what were they doing with their limbs? Nothing. They were biting with those gigantic heads. The limbs would do nothing, so they didn't use them for that anymore. I will point out, however, that the T-Rex line, Tyrannosaurids, are not the line with the smallest limbs. That's Abelisaurids. Look up Carnotaurus sometime. Carnotaurus forelimbs are so small and are actually atrophied. They don't. Some paleontologists think they're not even visible. Like the bones are still there, but it's like a whale's back legs. The bones are still there for a whale to have back legs, but most whales don't have back legs. The bones are just inside the body. They think that's what the case with Carnotaurus. The bones might not have even been showing. There wasn't even a visible limb. Other people think they did have them and they possibly used them for display purposes. But regardless, that's what I think about that.
That's something I hadn't thought about, that a Tyrannosaurus doesn't need its arms. Like, I never thought Razagath's arms were atrophied. That's just, the way they are. And she clearly does not need those arms for anything.
No.
Some of the things she does in Raid is she shoots giant lightning bolts out of her mouth. She does not need arms to swipe at you. And she beats her wings and knocks you off the platform. She beats her wings so fiercely to send you flying off of this gigantic platform that the fight is on. So it doesn't matter if she skipped arm day, it doesn't matter if she doesn't have beefy, strong arms. She will straight up murder you. That's no reason to think that she is lesser in any way, because she's still very dangerous, and she's also very angry at us. So,
yep.
Yeah.
But I think, Liz, I think you're up now.
Oh no, it's my turn again. To Liz and Joe and Rossi, where do you think Anduin is right now? I haven't played much since Warlords, but last I remember he was being very annoying in Pandaria, and now he's gone. I understand he was around in Legion and BFA and Shadowlands, and that I missed his story, but I'm more wondering what he's doing now. Pete.
Recovering.
Yeah, I hope he's at a spa somewhere, just chilling out and trying not to think about this. If you really missed out on his whole Shadowlands story, then he basically got kidnapped by Sylvanas and turned into a murder machine who did the jailer's will. And he was a raid boss who actually got pretty close to murdering all of us. It was really fun. Anduin, not so much a fan of that, and he kind of noped out of everything.
He's currently on a farm in Tranor.
just
he's in Outland. Actually, he's at Thrall's farm in Outland. Because Thrall's hanging around in Orgrimmar.
I would take that. If you were to tell me that he is chilling at out in Outland, like trying to get his groove back, I'd be like, okay,
There's going to be a cinematic at some point where Gen has to come find him, and he's like, Anduin is gigantically swole now, and he's like, what? I'm not going back. I won't be king again. I didn't ask. And then I don't know, night elves will attack, and I don't know why.
Maybe he's out on a pumpkin farm somewhere, because that does seem like the human thing. I mean,
he's still
humans
really
have a lot of pumpkin farms.
He's still enormously swole from all the giant pumpkins he's carrying. And at one point he has to kick over a pumpkin and his sword's under there. And he pulls his sword out from under the pumpkin. Like, what have you been doing with that thing? I've been making pumpkins with it. What do you think? It's jack-o'-lantern time.
I mean, he's somewhere getting his head together, because he's been through some rough, traumatic things. I mean, hopefully he's on a beach having like a nice relaxing time, because he has not had a good time of it. He became king because his father died, and then just the entire world went to hell. I mean, Azeroth is usually
kind of literally for a while there.
Yeah.
I mean, in all seriousness, we know that he's trying to, for lack of a better term, like rebalance himself. It's not exactly a small traumatic experience he's coming back from. He went through a lot. It took a long time for him to recover from a lot of that. And even at the end of Shadowlands, there's an extra little thing where you can see him go and talk with Sylvanas, and you can see how haunted he is, because that's the thing, right? Everything he did, the lights were on at home. He knew what he was doing. He was forced to watch what he was doing from the inside. The jailer left him conscious enough in order to torture him, essentially. So like you don't come back from that and just like immediately go back to happy fun times, or to ruling a kingdom, or to dealing with conflict immediately. And a lot of times he's still trying to figure out who he is, and as a king, as a person. There's a lot of that, and there was problems with that before Shadowlands happened as well. In Madeline Rowe's book, Madeline Rue's book, there's a whole series, a sequence of him escaping the castle of Stormwind, taking on a new an alternate persona, which I think was Jarek, I think was the name. Just to learn and feel normal and see what people in the kingdom were doing, to try to feel more connected to them. He was already feeling weird about being a king and who he was as a human, and what Liz pointed out, all that's valid too. So honestly, I just hope he's at a spa somewhere. Was it as a spa, getting like all of his like stress taken away. He's going through the meditation classes, and he needs something. He needs something to before he can come back and hang out with us again.
Have you not gone to the spa here? You don't want to send him to a spa in World of Warcraft. There's elementals attacking, and people are being kidnapped, and there's a dog turning people into chunks of raw meat. And no, man, spas aren't relaxing at all. He'd be better off on Thrall's farm.
I mean, maybe there's a nicer spa than the spa.
Nicer spa than one run by dragons. I mean, come on. Dragons love luxury. You're going to tell me there aren't dragons just showing up to lay on hot rocks? That'd be like so cool for them.
Well, that's the VIP spa. We've only seen the normal people's spa.
Anduin is like this really interesting character, because he's like, we've watched him grow up over the course of the game. When the game launched, he was a tiny child, still standing in the throne room of Stormwind, but he hasn't had a chance to grow up. He's been here in the middle of it this whole time. And first he was, kind of being pushed around by Katrina Prester and manipulated. And he's just a child kind of stuck in this role because his mother's gone. His father has vanished. And, after his father came back, of course, his father is like super overprotective. And he doesn't get to do anything, and he has to run away and be an annoyance for all of us in Pandaria. And then all of a sudden he's king. He has never had a minute to be himself or to figure out who he is. He's always been in the spotlight, and it's probably past time for him to nope out and say, okay, I need some me time. I need to figure this out. I need to be alone. I need people to not be staring at me in the throne room all the time. Bye.
Okay, I mean, that seems like a pretty good place to stop. We're kind of past time, so do you think you can do like one last one quickly, or what do you think we should stop here?
Honestly, I think the one from Pete we can probably do fairly quickly.
Okay. Go for it. Joe?
Sure. This is from Pete. Was just wondering how y'all feel healing is going this expansion. I dumped my Holy Pally for Preservation Evoker, and so far I'm happy. Will Blizz buff Pallies in other classes, or will they leave them bad so I can keep shining as Evoker? So literally, I was just talking about this in chat, and I've been complaining about this for a while. Evokers are the flavor of the month right now, and we are running into the same problem that we always run into with healer classes. With hero classes, which is they're always overtuned when they first drop. Always. It has happened every single time. Death Knights, when they first were released, dominated everything. You wanted to be a tank? Guess you're rolling a Death Knight. Didn't matter what flavor, you were rolling a Death Knight. When Monks released, they dominated healing and tanking. I don't know how they did on DPS. Demon Hunters, they dominated tanking and DPS. And this is just the next evolution of it. Evokers are going to get tuned down. Somebody made an argument that they feel like Evokers don't offer enough utility to a group, that they have to be overtuned to compensate for that. I don't agree. But when an undergeared Evoker is doing 15k more healing per second than me, who's been healing for 18 years, and it's somebody who hasn't healed in probably a decade, there's a problem. Right. And a lot of the classes do feel weaker, and I'll let Liz talk about her experiences. But right now I feel Restoration Shaman is super weak comparatively. And I kind of expected that going into this, but like I'm feeling like I'm struggling as a healer if I'm not playing an Evoker. And I'm hoping that we'll get more class tuning than what I've seen in the 10.5 patch notes, at least for my class, which is my Healing Tide does more when I'm not in combat, because that's a thing. Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't feel great if you're not an Evoker right now, at least in my opinion. How has your experience been, Liz?
Well, I want to bring it back to Evokers for a minute because there's something really interesting. It feels like Vault of the Incarnates was specifically designed to show how amazing Preservation Evokers are. There's stuff that you have to do in Vault of the Incarnates that you cannot do without an Evoker. Evokers are super mobile. They have all of these ways to get around. They have amazing big healing cooldowns. And specifically for Razagath, because we were just talking about how she has those giant wings and she tries to throw you off the platform, with Evokers, your cooldown, the whole raid has reduced cooldowns on movement abilities. And they also have a cooldown that lets everyone in the raid use their movement ability again, even if it's on cooldown. So, like, on Razagath, at minimum, you need a Preservation Evoker in your group, because that's the only way you're going to survive Razagath trying to throw you off into the void. So I think that's interesting because, you know, it's a new class. You do kind of want to see how it plays and what advantages it has. But also, it does make kind of every other healer feel like, I don't know what I'm bringing to the table, because Evokers have so much. They are doing so many cool things, and I'm just doing exactly the same things I was doing last expansion. So yeah, I think other classes always feel kind of left out when there's a shiny new class, because it's like, wow, they have all these cool toys, and I don't have any new cool toys. I have the same old toys. I mean, I'm playing a Holy Paladin right now. I don't feel bad about it. I don't feel amazing about it, but I don't feel bad about it. And I like the talent trees, even though I don't think they're perfect, but I'm content right now, but I'm kind of envious of all of the cool shiny toys Evokers have. And, you know, none of the rest of us got any cool new shiny toys. We're playing with, you know, toys that are like 4 expansions old at this point.
Or in some cases, some of my toys have been taken away and not replaced.
Yeah.
But yeah, they need to take a pass at healing is what the TLDR is. If you're an Evoker, a Preservation Evoker, live it up. Like, bask in that glory. Do it. Enjoy that time. Because it, like every other class, it's going to get tuned, and hopefully, and this is me fingers crossed, we'll reach a balance point.
One thing I do wonder is, like, is the next raid going to show us, like, the next evolution of healing? Because Vault of the Incarnates has been so balanced around having an Evoker in the party. So is the next raid going to kind of like show off other healers? Or are they going to make the next raid again with Evokers in mind, expecting you to have Evoker tools in your raid's tool set?
I'm very curious to see that as well.
All right. But I think that actually does it for the show. So yeah, I'm glad we had that discussion though. I'm glad Yo said that we had time for it because it was a good way to close it out. I'm not playing a healer right now, so I don't have any feedback on that. But Joe, if you don't mind doing your thing.
Not a problem. Blizzard Watch is made possible due to the generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means this podcast signing community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to the podcast, better chance at having your question answered on our podcast with a queue, and an ads-free site experience.
Thank you very much, Joe, and also thank you to Liz for being here and putting up with a lot of stuff and reading questions and all that. I do want to say if you've got a question for the show, you can hit up our Discord. We've got the podcast Q and podcast questions channel for non-patrons because we do want to have our non-patrons get to ask us questions. Your support is still important. There's also the patron Q and podcast questions channel for our patrons because you guys pay the bills, and that's really awesome of you. And if you want to send an email, you can send an email to podcast@blizzardwatch.com with the subject line podcast or Blizzard Watch. This has been the Blizzard Watch podcast. Thank you guys so much for being here, and we'll see you next week.